right. So what do you think the valuations that we're talking on Airbnb and DoorDash say about where we are right now in terms of the market?
Well, I think there's not a lot to buy, and these are very promising companies. I would say Airbnb much more so than DoorDash, because I think it is a creature of the pandemic, and we'll see how those trends continue. But I do think Airbnb has really changed its business in response to the pandemic, and then they're very well positioned coming out of the pandemic, as hotel companies really are going to struggle for a long time, and they can shift as you've seen in this pandemic. You know, they're taking the money they can. There's a little bit of SPAC influence here, which is an attitude in Silicon Valley, is why not get as much money as possible and not leave it on the table for investors? And I completely think that's the right way to go. And so why not just price it at a very high rate, as they should? And they'll probably get it and even higher. They're trying to avoid that pop, I guess, that is kind of a waste. It's nonsense for these companies to have to do that. It's exciting perhaps for CNBC, but not for the companies or the employees, their shareholders themselves.
Yeah. You talk about a little bit of SPAC influence, sort of raises some eyebrows, especially this morning in light of what Nikola's shares are doing, Kara. How much of that do you think is a liability in the short to medium term?
Well, I do think it just depends on the fundamental business, right? I mean, some of the SPAC companies are not companies that would have gone public, right? So it's a question, of whether they should be going public. And the market's just speaking about what they think things are worth, right, at this moment in time. And the question is, do you believe in a company like DoorDash for the future? Will the delivery business continue to be booming, when the vaccines come into play in the summer and late fall? And then the question is whether Airbnb has a really strong position coming out of the pandemic, which I think they do. And so that's what people are valuing them on. And so I think these numbers are not out of line. It is a very small amount of revenue. I think Airbnb is at $4.7 billion in 2019, and DoorDash was $1.8 billion. These are small revenue figures for the valuations, but I think people are buying a lot into the future. We talked about this accelerated future, and both companies do represent that, and that's a question of what will happen to them, in the fall is what I would be looking at.
Kara, it's interesting looking at DoorDash and its S1. I think about how straightforward they are about what they are. Unlike, say, GoPro, which tried to make this media company, claim as it went public, or even Uber with the whole flying taxi and then the transportation company thing and the automated, self-driving cars. DoorDash seems to be very focused on what it actually does. Do you think that's going to be enough for investors? Do you think that they're going to dig down and see the data and technology side of this business?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what is it? It's a delivery service. I don't know what else you could say. And I think restaurants are certainly on their back feet, during this pandemic. And the question is whether these relationships will continue going forward, whether consumers will continue to do delivery. I think I'm going to stop doing delivery for the rest of my life after this. I don't know. I don't know where the trends are. And then I don't know where they pivot into. What do they pivot into?
Well, Amazon's kind of a delivery service. Whether you think about digital delivery or physical delivery, and it's been a pretty good bet for investors.
Yeah, but it's not. This is an Amazon. They're not going to be turning into Amazon anytime soon, that I can tell. But and Amazon's Amazon, so I would bet on Amazon in that regard. And so the question is, what happens to the delivery business, and how big it gets, and what happens when people can go out again. I think restaurants, I'm more bullish on restaurants over the long term, even though it's a very difficult business in the best of times. I think people are going to really want to get out much more. And so I would see a downturn in that. Maybe I'm wrong. But people are used to doing it. It's just New York City had it forever, and now everybody has what New York City had, I guess, delivery services. I'm more bullish on Airbnb because I do think they have handled this pandemic very well, given the crisis. And they have an easy pivot back into when people start to travel again. And the hotel businesses, they have a lot of ways to go here. And they had a lot of stuff they put on the shelf, a lot of really interesting and promising businesses they can pivot into, whether it's airlines or experiences, double down on those or whatever. They have a lot of directions to go in travel. And so I think that's they're kind of the Amazon of that, if you want to call everything the Amazon of.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.